And meanwhile, the Hong Kong government has managed to get the courts to issue a temporary ban on the posting or spreading of online messages that encourage violence. It's the latest bid to dampen months of protests, chaos and social unrest. The new injunction applies to all internet platforms, but specifically named messaging app Telegram and the LIHKG forum. Both platforms have been widely used by anti-government protesters to organize demonstrations. For more, joining us on this is Fu Qinghua, an associate professor at the Journalism and Media Studies Center at the University of Hong Kong. Firstly, the latest injunction against online violent messages specifically targets apps used by protesters, such as Telegram. How would this ban be enforced or executed?
I believe that the government move of using this injunction is primarily a gesture, because the existing law is already have the power to empower the police to make arrest against those who post messages that inciting violence online. So it doesn't add additional power to the government to do the enforce to ban the messages. So because that is already very difficult to enforce the ban, the platform are not an international platform, and also the people on internet mostly are anonymized. So very difficult to identify the personal information, and also even the service provider does not have the personal identity of the user. So it basically is very difficult to implement, no matter existing force or using the injunction.
Okay, so then by having this, then do you think it's just going to make things worse if it's so difficult to even enforce?
I think we should put it into context that this is basically the third injunction that the government tried to do it, to try to suppress the social movement in the past 4 months. Basically, a month ago, the government introduced an emergency law to Hong Kong to try to implement the anti-mask law into the Hong Kong. It's a whole series of things that the government trying to do. So that actually had a message that basically the government is trying very hard to using the law enforcement and the police force to calm down the protests, but it's pretty unsuccessful. It basically the government kind of no way to stop all the protests and violence in the street. So that also because the government avoid using any kinds of political means to try to solve the problem. Especially they try not to do any further concession to the protesters. So that's why they basically had no means to try to handle the situation right now in Hong Kong.
So do you see the situation sort of rumbling on as it has done for the last few months? Surely even the protesters must be running out of steam to a certain extent.
I don't think so, because we just look at the very recent a few weeks. We still see quite a large number of people joining the protests in the street. Of course, it's not like the previous one in the larger scale, but it's still a very large scale. It's still quite a substantial number are still supporting the protests. Just based on some of the recent opinion poll, we still find that quite a number of people basically are very still supporting the 5 demands that the protester request for, and the government and the police, their approval rate basically go to the historically low until now. So I don't really see that that really can calm down the protesters. I believe that will continue the large-scale protest in the streets.
All right, very quickly, you know, critics have called the ban an extremely dangerous precedent. Is this labeling actually warranted?
I think this makes some sense to me because, as I just said, basically the government move is a gesture. It's really not intend to execute the law. So basically, it's want to send a message to the public that they can do whatever legal means to restrict online messages. So if this is set up as a precedent, that would be that invite further injunction or even more legal means that will be introduced in the future, especially when a lot of speculation already in the past year, 12 months, the government may introduce the Article 23 legislation to Hong Kong in the coming 12 months. That I think all things are all connected.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking to us, Professor Fu. Speaking to Fu Qinghua, Associate Professor at University of Hong Kong.